Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Crystal Amber Fund Limited investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged. They can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab that's just situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Please just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company can review all questions submitted today and will publish those responses where it's appropriate to do so on the Investor Meet Company platform. Before we begin, we would just like to submit the following poll. If you give that your kind attention, I'm sure the company would be most grateful. And I would now like to hand you over to Chairman Chris Waldron. Chris, good morning, sir.
Good morning and welcome to this Morphic medical presentation. I'm Chris Waldron, the Chairman of Crystal Amber Fund Limited. Crystal Amber is an AIM-listed activist fund that has a long record of making investments in a limited number of special situations, and Morphic Medical is one of those. And in fact, not only is it our most significant investment, I think arguably it's the most interesting and most promising of all our investments. And so it's entirely correct that it merits a presentation of its own. And just on that note, it's worth just reiterating that we will be answering questions, or more specifically, Mike will be answering questions on Morphic, but we're not in a position to answer questions on Crystal Amber, the fund. For the further information on the fund, I would direct you to our annual report and accounts, which are due to be released tomorrow morning to the stock market. Crystal Amber first invested a small toehold investment in the company that was to eventually become Morphic over a decade ago, but it has grown in importance to the fund, not least as we have pursued our current mandate of steady divestment and returning capital to shareholders. When the current mandate was initiated in 2021, Morphic represented only around 10% of the portfolio. However, as time has passed, and especially since the successful sale of our large stake in Delarue earlier this year, now Morphic represents approximately 70% of Crystal Amber's net asset value. This year, we're very pleased that Morphic regained its CE mark in Europe and the equivalent in the UK after a lot of extensive work by the management team. These accreditations are essential for a medical device company to actually sell its product, and so they're crucial to Morphic. We're also pleased to have supervised a revamping of the management structure, which culminated in Mike Guttridge, to my left, being appointed CEO earlier this year. I think from the Crystal Amber perspective, we're very confident that we now have a very exciting product and the right management team to take Morphic to its next stage of growth. We, as you can tell, are very excited by the opportunity, and so without further ado, I'll pass on to Mike Guttridge, CEO of Morphic Medical, to lead you through the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate the introduction and the opportunity to present to the shareholders of Crystal Amber. So before I start, I just want to give you a little bit of information about myself. I've been in the device or healthcare industry for 31 years, 25 of which has been specialized in medical devices. And I've worked for companies like Arthrocare, where we scaled the UK and international business, which resulted in a sale of the business to Smith & Nephew for $1.9 billion. Following my 14 years at Arthrocare, I went to Apollo Endosurgery, where we pioneered endobariatric devices. So endobariatric devices are minimally invasive devices to help with obesity. I led the outside US team of everything from Australia to Brazil and within, where we launched our flagship product in over 68 countries. And that resulted in an acquisition to Boston Scientific for $615 million. For the last 2 years, I've been at Morphic Medical. I'm really excited to take up the leadership role of President and CEO. So with that said, I'm now going to take you through a deck about Morphic and also our flagship product, Reset. So hopefully you can see my slides, and really Reset is the world's first medical device focused on treating the root cause of obesity and type 2 diabetes. Now that's a nice slogan, but what does it actually mean? So I'm going to get into how that works and what it means in the next slide. But the purpose of this presentation is really to talk to you about the market opportunity, the mode of action of how our device works, positioning of our product within the current bariatric space, some headline evidence on clinical evidence, our launch strategy in Europe. I'll share with you our management team, some future milestones, and how we compare in the market. But what you can see on the left-hand side of this slide is Morphic, and change starts within. So obviously Morphic Medical is the company, and that's strapline is change starts within. And the idea behind this is people can go about their healthy lives with our device in them, which allows them to have good quality of life. And you can see that on the picture of one of our marketing collateral pieces on the right-hand slide. So what are we trying to do? We talk about Reset and aligner. I think the most important thing is we're patient-centric. And why are we treating these patients? So we talk about metabolic disease. Metabolic disease is made up of obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease, abbreviated here as CVD. Now, these are all interlinked, and they result in over 7.1 million deaths annually from obesity and type 2 diabetes alone. So what we're trying to do is help people lose weight, reduce their blood sugar, which I will refer to as HbA1c, and ultimately save patients' lives, giving quality of lives to the patients and their families. So when we look at the market, now 16% of the global population is obese. That equates to 890 million people living with obesity around the world. Then when we look at how many of those 890 million people have type 2 diabetes, that equates to 272 million people. So the overlap of obese type 2 diabetes is our target market, and that equates to an opportunity of $1.2 trillion in total opportunity. Now, on the right-hand side of the page, you'll see the existing market. So less than 1% of people living with obesity elect to go for bariatric surgery. So that's 600,000 procedures a year. And that market represents 3.6 billion by 2030. Now, we know from past experiences that people are searching for a less invasive solution, so a minimally invasive solution for obesity. And that's where endobariatrics come into play. There's no incision. It's done through a scope down your throat to treat obesity with no permanent scars or incisions. There's also the onset of GLP-1s, which you'll hear in the press as weight loss jabs. This market is expected to be 71 billion by 2032. But we know that many patients stop taking the GLP-1s. Around about 50% will discontinue that GLP therapy within a year. And there's lots of evidence pointing to people regaining weight within 9 to 18 months. And then if we were to segment the bariatric surgery market, there's 600,000 bariatric surgeries. The only procedure that has a broad impact on metabolic disease is the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass. So just to reiterate, our target market is the overlap between obesity and type 2 diabetes, which is 272 million people globally. So our solution is Reset. Reset is a 9-month implant that sits in the duodenum, which is the small bowel just beneath the stomach, which you can see illustrated in the picture to your left. It's a 20-minute endoscopic procedure. There's no stay in hospital. It's done as a day case. There are no incisions to the patient, and there's no change in the patient's anatomy. Now, what that means is we're not blocking any future procedures for that patient. We've done over 3,000 implants to date, and we've got great results showing the reduction of HbA1c, which is blood sugar, so reducing blood sugar, lowering the BMI, which is reducing the patient's weight, and also limiting the use of insulin or coming off insulin altogether. So that's the implant. 9 months later, the device is removed through, again, another endoscopic procedure, which again takes about 20 minutes. So how the device works. Now, I'm not going to go into a great level of detail here, but if anyone has any questions towards the end, I'm happy to take them. But essentially, our device sits in the small intestine, which stops food coming into contact with the duodenum, which enhances the body's natural hormones, which results in lowering the blood sugar and reducing weight. Then when the food remixes with the bile acids, it sends a signal to your brain to say, stop eating, you've got work to do, you need to digest this food, which is found further down in the small intestine. So it sends a signal to the brain, stop eating, you're full. Where we sit in the current market, rightly so, lifestyle and diet and exercise are the first thing you should try. And you can see that on the left-hand side of the screen. After lifestyle, diet and exercise, if that doesn't work, people search for the next thing to help them lose weight, which could be either diabetes drugs like metformin or weight loss drugs like semaglutide or tirzepatide. But we know that these are expensive. We know that as soon as people stop taking these drugs, they regain weight. So naturally, the next place is the minimally invasive endoscopy market, of which there are about 70,000 procedures done a year, and that's growing at around about 15% per year. This is where we sit in this bariatric endoscopy space. And then moving forward is the bariatric surgery. Now, we believe that our device is well suited as it's technically easy to use from a physician point of view, which means it's scalable. Many physicians can use it, and there's a low learning curve. Many physicians that are in their busy NHS or practices around the world can't dedicate 50 cases to go through a learning curve. We believe our learning curve is around 3 to 5 patients, and we'll support them through that. So over the next couple of slides, I'm going to talk about the GLP-1 market, the bariatric endoscopy market, and the invasive surgery market. So this is just an illustration. There's no numbers here. It's just our thinking. If you look at the big blue circle with obesity and type 2 diabetes, that's the amount of patients that are eligible for treatment. The green circle represents around about 6% of this market, which is the GLP-1s, the weight loss jabs. The red circle are people that don't respond to weight loss jabs. So in essence, they've failed that treatment approach. And those red people, the red circle are looking for different solutions. The yellow circle represents the bariatric surgery market. That's 600,000 patients having treatment every year. So what we believe is that red market is really an entry level for the yellow market. So I don't believe that GLP-1s will eat up the bariatric space, which some people suggest. We believe that it's opening up the space and giving more people access to endoscopic bariatric surgery. The next slide looks at the bariatric endoscopic space, and here on the left you can see ESG. This is the product which I launched in over 68 markets around the world. It's a very good product. It acts by restricting the stomach space by 75%. It's a day case up to 1 night in stay in hospital. It's partially reversible. Technically, it's challenging to reverse, but it can be reversed. The mode of action is restriction of the stomach, but it's very challenging to do. It needs a high level of skill from a doctor and a high learning curve of over 50 cases to be competent with this device. And you'll get a reduction of total body weight by 13.6%. And that's from the MERIT trial, which was used for FDA approval. The IGB, which stands for intergastric balloon, is another restrictive stomach surgery, which is minimally invasive. It's a day case. It is reversible. It works by restriction of the stomach. It's technically easy, but the weight loss is around about 10.2%. Again, that's from the FDA study in the US. Our solution Reset works differently. So it's a day case, the same as the IGB, but it's also reversible. But the way it works is malabsorption, so it's not allowing nutrients to absorb in that first part of the duodenum, but also it's creating a hormonal change, increasing the levels of GLP-1 in the body's natural environment. And the weight loss that we see is around about 18.9%. As we move to the bariatric space, I mentioned Roux-en-Y gastric bypass is the only bariatric surgery that gives metabolic resolution. But you can see here on the left, the red X's represent, sorry, just bear with me 1 second. The red X's on the left represent staple lines for invasive surgery. It's a 2 to 4 day stay in the hospital. There's a surgical incision. There's blind anatomy. Now, what that means is you can no longer get to the stomach and view any pathology changes within that part of the organ. And there's mortality involved with a 0.1% mortality rate. When you compare it to Reset, you can see that we're doing the same. We're excluding the first part of the duodenum, but we're doing it with a liner implant. There's no change to anatomy. There's no surgical incision. There's no blind anatomy. There's no anastomosis, and we've had no mortality to date. So then considering it from the patient perspective, so this is the slanting flowchart, which I showed earlier, but in more towards metabolic. So you can see lifestyle and diet and exercise first, followed by pharma drugs, GLP-1s and diabetic drugs. But then we get to this point where the HCP, so the doctor, has to make a decision what to do if these patients fail. So our guidance is if a patient has obesity, they should go to an obesity-only type procedure, whether that be an intergastric balloon, an endoscopic sleeve gastroplasty, or sleeve gastrectomy. Now, it doesn't necessarily go one, then the next, then the next. It can go straight to the sleeve gastrectomy or straight to an ESG, etc. But if the patient has type 2 diabetes and obesity, we suggest they go here, which before us, there was nothing for a broad metabolic approach before a Roux-en-Y gastric bypass. Now, just to remind you, this market is around about 272 million people a year, annually, which equates to $1.2 trillion worth of opportunity. So going through to clinical evidence, now we've got over 150 publications around the world on our device. But this study is a meta-analysis, which means It's a combination of multiple studies bringing together high level of evidence into one publication. So this study looked at 14 studies for HbA1c, which is the blood sugar, and 10 studies for weight loss. It was done by Chris Thompson's team from Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, one of the world's leading metabolic hospitals. And it showed a 1.3% reduction in HbA1c, so blood sugar. And to give you an example, if a patient has a blood sugar level of 8.5 and we're reducing it by 1.3, that can potentially take the patient off insulin. And that's one of the things that came out in this study was 37% of patients either reduced insulin or discontinued the use of it altogether. The second key thing that came out of this study was the total body weight loss of 18.9%, which is really good for the patient. So to give you an example, if you weigh 100 kilograms and you lose 18.9 kilograms, you'd be very comfortable with that achievement. Then looking at this study from the UK, this was done by Dr. Ryder in the NHS. He had a UK NHS service where he treated a number of patients and then followed those patients for 3 years after the device was removed. And he showed that 77% of patients maintained the weight loss and their normalized blood sugar. The 23% that didn't do so well, they all noted to have some kind of event that derailed their journey, whether it be a bereavement, depression, or a major health problem, which stopped them with their journey. So just putting that into very clear terms of what that means, the baseline of these patients, so before they had the procedure, they were 121 kilos. Directly when the device was removed, they were 103 kilos. And then they gained a little bit of weight, but they really maintained the majority of their weight loss 3 years after the removal of the device. And the same for HbA1c. Their baseline was 9.1. So HbA1c is blood sugar. Their baseline was 9.1. They dropped down to 7.1, so off insulin. And they gained a little bit to 7.6, but again, the majority off insulin. Then continuing with our clinical data, we're collecting data in the US. This is to support our FDA application to enter the US market. This is what we call a randomized controlled trial. So it is really looking at the blood sugar lowering, weight, liver disease, cardiovascular events, chronic kidney disease, and the amount of patients that are off insulin at 12 and 24 months. So when we say randomize, it's randomized 3 patients for our device and 1 having the control, which is lifestyle modifications. And when we say double-blinded sham, it means the patient doesn't know what procedure they're having, and also the person measuring the patient doesn't know what they've had. So it's a very high-level study design. We're currently recruiting for stage 1, where we're 20% of stage 1 is complete. We expect to complete phase 1 by between March and May 2026, and then we'll move to stage 2, which is another 134 patients, and we expect to complete enrollment in 2028. Our principal investigator is Chris Thompson from Brigham and Women's Hospital. As I mentioned earlier, it's one of the world's leading metabolic units. And just as I finish off the clinical piece of this presentation, we've had strong guidelines from ESGE, which is the European Society of Gastroenterology, and the American counterpart, which is the ASGE. They've recommended that in adults with obesity and type 2 diabetes, they suggest treatment with the DJBL, which is a duodenal bypass liner, which is reset plus lifestyle modification over lifestyle modification alone. So just to remind you, that's that 272 million people they're recommending this procedure for. So moving on to the commercial side of the business, and this is very high level. Our international strategy is really launching the product in a safe and effective manner, which is focused around professional education, which I'll get into in a moment. But we're focused on both Germany and UK as direct markets, where we'll have direct salespeople working with clinicians to expand the access for our device. We are in the process of expanding our distributor market with trusted distributors that focus on market development, training, and reimbursement. And we've already signed distributors in Czech Republic, Spain, Belgium, and Netherlands. And then as we grow, we will continue to expand our headcount as we increase market share. From a professional education perspective, this is a key driver to our business. We're focused on multidisciplinary team training. So that means surgeons, gastroenterologists, diabetologists, and nutritionists. And they all come together to our training as a team to make sure we educate them on how to look after patients as well as how to do the procedure. Because the most important thing to us at Morphic is good patient outcomes. We continue to support these doctors as they go back to their own hospitals through that learning curve of what we believe to be 3 to 5 cases. We'll have either doctors or clinical support in the room with them as they're treating patients, again, to promote good patient outcomes. And we're developing our team to have outstanding clinical skills to be able to support customers in the field. And the most important thing for us is building the scalable training model. We're working with partnerships with scope companies to provide the equipment to allow us to do the training. And we've built low-cost models to be able to roll this out at a reduced cost. From a market expansion point of view, we're focused on controlled geographic expansion to key locations where we have unmet needs. So we assess the market before we enter. We have business cases looking at the market opportunity, and then we work with our regulatory affairs team to work on a regulatory approval process. And markets like that are places like the Middle East or Asia Pacific or Latin America. We plan to expand access through reimbursement initiatives in key markets. We've already got reimbursement initiatives going underway in the UK and in Germany. And we're in the development phase of our reimbursement initiative in the US, ready for market launch. And then lastly, we're attending strategic congresses to expand our customer base, specifically in the diabetes area. So just looking at our sales strategy. So I know this is a relatively busy slide, but this circle here is where we start. We find a gastroenterologist or a bariatric surgeon that wants to use our device, and then we make them busy. So we work with the multidisciplinary team to educate them. Now, every hospital has a multidisciplinary team of different specialties where they come together to discuss patients. We educate them about Reset as a device and the potential benefits, and they come together to agree a pathway for the patients. The second phase of this is continuing to make that GI or bariatric surgeon busy by igniting local referrals. So this is an evening program where we target primary care physicians that specialize in diabetes, obesity, and liver disease. And we hold educational events to inform them how Reset works and how it can benefit their patients, with the hope that they refer to the GI or bariatric surgeon. And then lastly, as we grow and get national coverage, we expect to roll out a direct-to-patient marketing, which is really focused on our website with a Find a Specialist. And then we have social media campaigns to advertise the patients where we're allowed to do so, to drive them to our website where they can pick a clinician to go to. And then lastly, we'll work with patient associations to educate patients on options out there for them. So just moving, I've just a few more slides left, but just moving through the experienced leadership team that we have. I'm not going to read through all of this, but I just want to highlight some people. We've got on the left-hand side, the board of directors. John Barr is one of our directors. I worked with John Barr at Apollo Endosurgery, where he was the chairman of the board and really understands the endobariatric space and a great asset to the board. And then we've got Ginger Glazer, who is a specialist in not only manufacturing, but RAQA, which is regulatory affairs and quality affairs. So that's helping us with the FDA study in the US. And then very recently, we brought on Jane Wright as a CFO. Jane is exceptionally experienced in both finance and also operations. I've worked with Jane at two previous companies, both ArthroCare and Apollo Endosurgery, and she's a huge asset to our business. And then last week, actually, we had Mark Firth that joined our business. He's taken up the lead for sales and marketing across our international geographies. Again, very experienced. I've worked with him both at ArthroCare and Apollo Endosurgery. He really understands the endobariatric space, which will speed up adoption in our local markets. So just moving on to the timeline. So in 2018, we had approval to start our FDA study, which is the Step 1 study, under an IDE, so an indemnity device exemption. So it means we can ship the device in the US for study centers. In 2019, we published our worldwide registry, which now has over 1,298 patients in, which was presented 3 weeks ago by the president of the Global Bariatric Society at the World Congress. In 2020, we enrolled our first patient into the Step 1 study. And as you can imagine, COVID then hit very, very quickly, so it did delay things. But in 2023, we rebranded GI Dynamics to Morphic Medical and Endobarrier to Reset. And 2025, we've had a fantastic year to date where we've received ISO certification. This is the quality certificate to allow us to operate as a medical device company. We've received CE mark in July 2025, which allows us access to the European Union market. At the end of July 2025, we had MHRA registration in the UK. And then in September, we did our first commercial case in the UK at King's College Hospital, London. Future milestones as we move forward, we expect to complete our phase 1 of the Step 1 study in 2026. Towards the end of 2026, we expect to launch in both Latin America and the Middle East. In 2027, we expect to launch in APAC, in select countries. And in 2028, we plan to complete the Step 1 enrollment with entering the US market in 2029. So this slide just really looks at how we compare to other companies in the market. So in June 2025, pre-CE mark, Morphic Medical was valued at 108 million. We've now achieved CE mark, which is de-risking the business considerably. We have a wealth of clinical data, over 150 publications and 6 RCTs. And to give you an idea, an RCT costs anywhere between 2 and 15 million to complete. So it's a wealth of data which will help us expedite our reimbursement pathways in key countries. We believe the post-CE mark valuation should be around about 130 million, which we believe is reasonably valued compared to the peers in the endoscopic space. And you can see that on the chart on the left-hand side. You can see Apollo Endosurgery had revenues of 80 million, which sold for 615 million to Boston Scientific. And then we've got 3 startups, Fractal, Morphic Medical, and Endogenics. We believe we're roughly valued the same, and all of us are pre-revenue at this stage. I believe it's a reasonable expectation to exit this business at around about 400 million, which would be 7 to 10 times revenue. And we've had a lot of interest from multiple strategic medical device companies where we're in discussions about investment. Obviously, I can't go into detail on that at the moment. So just really summing things up, we believe there's a huge problem out there with patients living with both obesity and type 2 diabetes. We believe that pharmacological options are not the final solution. There are many patients that fail GLP-1s. We believe that many patients don't want to go to bariatric surgery because of the risk of that bariatric surgery, which is why only around about 600,000 people a year go towards that option. And we believe there's many metabolic issues for patients with obesity and type 2 diabetes. And you remember from one of the first slides, there was around about 7.1 million deaths a year coming from this problem. We believe that Reset is the solution that can help many patients, with over 3,000 patients treated globally, with proven results to reduce the HbA1c, so the blood sugar, reduce the BMI, so that's the weight, and also resolve many comorbidities. And it's a simple, reversible 20-minute procedure. We believe also that it's a large market opportunity with 272 million people around the world that's in that overlap between obesity and type 2 diabetes. I mentioned it was around about a 1.2 to 1.3 trillion dollar market as it stands today. That's due to increase to 2.5 trillion by 2030. And we also believe that the market is really demanding a less invasive, safe, scalable solution to be able to treat metabolic disease. So I'm not going to read through this slide. This is the standard disclaimer about Morphic Medical and Crystal Amber. But now I'm going to hand it over for questions. I appreciate your time this morning.
Perfect, Mike. That's great. If I may just jump back in there, and thank you very much indeed for your presentation this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions just by using the Q&A tab that's situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. But just while the team take a few moments to review those questions that have been submitted already, I'd just like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can all be accessed via your investor dashboards. Guys, you can see there we have received a number of questions, and thank you to all of those on the call for taking the time to submit their questions. But guys, perhaps if we dive straight into it, the first question that we have here reads as follows. The market for anti-obesity solutions in 2024 was estimated at over $15 billion and growing to well over $100 billion by the end of the decade, predominantly through medicinal means. What percentage of the market do you see Morphic targeting, and what do you see as the non-medicinal rivals in the field?
Great. Thanks for the question. Great question. There's lots of different numbers talking about the size of the market. But when we look at the size that we're targeting, it's that obese diabetic population of 272 million people that we're focused on. But then if we narrow that down more specifically, we're looking at the endoscopic market, which is around about 70,000 procedures a year, which is growing at 15% year on year. So we're specifically targeting that market, which would today's value would be 350 million, but by 2030 would be around about $600 million. There are other players in that space, and I mentioned that on the restricted stomach surgery endobariatric slide.
Perfect, thank you. The next question that we have here asks, can you talk more about professional education and supporting the customer?
Yeah, absolutely. This is key to our success. It's important that we educate not only the physician placing the device, but also the multidisciplinary team, the diabetologists and the surgeons and the nutritionists on how to follow up and look after the patients. We know that training a team will give a 20% better result and more adherence to the program for patients, resulting in more weight loss and more blood sugar reduction. So we plan to train them as a team and then support them back in their practice with clinical proctors.
Thanks, Mike. Just turning to the next question, what are your plans for reimbursement?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a really important question. In Germany, where the reimbursement system is complicated, but there's a mechanism to get reimbursement for the device through a NUB application. We've prepared the documentation and we plan to submit that documentation within the next 2 weeks. And that will hopefully give us a positive result in January to say that the healthcare system will pay for our device as well as the procedure. In the UK, we believe there's an existing DRG code which we can peg to for reimbursement. But then the US, we're still developing a reimbursement pathway, but we will have that ready for FDA approval.
Thanks, Mike. We have someone asking here, where is it manufactured and are there any supply chain risks?
Great question. So all of our products are sourced from the US, so we're not being hit by any potential tariffs. We're currently manufacturing in North Carolina with an outsourced manufacturing team that are in contract. There are always risks with supply chains. We're doing as much as we can to lessen those risks by having long contracts and lots of clauses to help us maintain supply. But all of our products are manufactured in the US.
And just adding on to that, is it fair to say that with the new management team, there's more greater refreshing focus on this area?
Oh, absolutely. And thanks, Chris. You're right. With the new management team, we are focused on this. In fact, I'm flying out to North Carolina on Monday to meet with the team there. So, yeah, there's a lot of focus.
Perfect. Thank you. Ultimately, which market do you see has the strongest opportunity for Morphic?
Yeah, so again, fantastic question. So the US is without doubt the strongest opportunity, but that's in the future. We expect to be in that market in 2029. In the short term, UK and Germany are our key markets. And then in the midterm, it's really about the Middle East and Latin America, Brazil and Chile. So they're the key markets as we go through the stages.
Thank you. Just turning to the next question, which asks, what is the 3 to 5 year growth plan and really just what is the expansion strategy?
Yeah, so that kind of ties in with the last question. Our growth plan is really focused around Europe, our direct markets, UK and Germany, and then moving out towards European distributor markets. And then in the midterm, we'll launch in both the Middle East and Latin America, and then the longer term in the US. I'm not going to share numbers on today's call, but we are very aggressive in our market, and we would expect to take between 15 and 30% market share of the endoscopic market.
Thank you. The next question asks, in a scaled up setting doing multiple procedures daily, how cost effective could reset be relative to medicinal solutions?
Yeah, so again, great question. There's lots of data talking about the cost of GLP-1s, and I know those costs will come down over time, but as soon as you stop taking those drugs, you start the journey to regain the weight within 9 to 18 months. So there are cost-effective studies around other endobariatric procedures that suggest that there's a huge saving for a device like ours compared to either GLP-1s or bariatric surgery. Our plan within the next 6 to 12 months is to complete an economic model to help prove that, and we'll publish that as well.
Thanks, Mike. When do you envisage the company moving from pre-revenue to revenue?
Today, absolutely. We've been focused on the approval and setting up the structure. We're currently hiring people in both Germany, US, and the UK. Over the summer months, and you can imagine it's very hard to get things moving through hospitals in summer months in Europe, we've trained 47 healthcare professionals, so 47 doctors across 18 sites. We expect those sites to start purchasing within the next weeks as opposed to months.
Perfect, thank you. And perhaps the final question that we have here, firstly says thank you for an interesting presentation, and then goes on to ask, how does a $400 million exit get realized when any interested parties could acquire a significant stake in Crystal Amber, which has a current market cap of £94 million?
I'm going to hand that question to Chris, I think.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that, Mike. And notwithstanding what I said in the introduction about taking questions about Crystal Amber, I think that's a very pertinent question. And it is absolutely true that Crystal Amber's market cap is around that number. The $400 million is where we think the company will be valued after a significant amount of work. And currently the discussions are about co-investments and supporting Morphic on its development and growth phase. So we're talking a long way down the line, but I'm not going to dispute the maths there. And yes, it is, I think, an attractive opportunity. And if you were an arbitrager, that would be an obvious thing to do. But our focus is on seeing this investee company through to develop through the studies and to maximise this investment in due course.
Perfect. Thank you both. And that actually concludes all the questions for this morning. So thank you very much indeed for being so generous of your time and addressing all of those that came in. And of course, if there are any further questions that do come through, we'll make these available to you immediately after the presentation has ended, just for you to review. But Chris, perhaps before really now just looking to redirect those on the call to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to yourself and the company, if I could please just ask you for a few closing comments just to wrap up with, that'd be great.
Thanks, Jake. And yes, and thank you to everyone who has joined this presentation this morning. I hope it was of interest. I think, as I said at the start, this is the most significant investment that Crystal Amber has probably owned, and it is the most interesting. There's a lot of work to be done, and clearly there can be no guarantees, but we are very happy with the management team that is now in place. The product is well positioned, the market is huge. And so the work needs to be done to bring this to fruition. So thank you once again. Thank you to Mike for his presentation. And we look forward to updating everyone on the progress of this company in due course. Thank you.
That's great. Chris, Mike, thank you once again for updating investors this morning. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can really better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Crystal Amber Fund Limited, we would like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That now concludes today's session, so good morning to you all.